Welcome and welcome back to Get Lost, the recap of the TV show that Ryan and I clearly can't let go. We have to go back again and again and again.
Always.
This show meant a lot to me, so welcome you all to discussing my favorite television show of all time, Lost. And this is my series, Get Lost. And if you have not heard of it before or haven't enjoyed these episodes, it's because it's been a break. I took quite a while between season 5 and now season 6. But the playlist, I put a little link for it down below. You can see this guy a bunch. Fire Guy Ryan, I think this is your third or fourth appearance?
I think. Yeah, I've pretty much done half of these now, I think.
If you don't know Fire Guy Ryan, I put the link for Comic Tom 101's channel down below. He is part of that Bags and Boards, Geek Street 101, Comic Tom 101 crew. And honestly, the first real friend I made in this community. So a guy that I've been chatting with.
Me too. You, that way.
Yeah, weird.
Way.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's been
right over here.
About a year and a half, but it seems
like we're buds.
There's a man. There's the man in white and the man in black here for you tonight. Exactly. We are here to talk about Lost. We're on the final season 6. And we are definitely going to, as Bueller said, have full spoilers tonight. And Bueller has been nice enough to join me on this show before. In fact, he was my first man through the gauntlet. He shares a love for this program as well. Yes. So let's go back up, though, and say hello to some folks like Sharon, Life with Two YouTubers, who's a really phenomenal lady. And she said she stopped after season 3 and hopes that this will still be fun. I think you'll enjoy it.
That's the high mark.
It is, actually, I disagree, but we'll talk a little bit about each season as we get along. I know Ryan's a big season 3 fan. Z Collects is in the chat. He says, I've never watched an episode. Will I still like this? I don't know. I don't know. It's really just Ryan and John being goofy.
The strength of us. That's why you're here.
Perry is another member of the Get Lost community, and he is saying this is happening. Yes, it is. I don't know that Perry ever caught up. I think he only watched as far as he had to join me on our discussion.
That sounds like Perry.
Yes. Just a Rican and his comics popped in and then popped right back out again, so I will talk to you later, sir. Backseat Driver, my homie, thank you for coming by. Yes, we're going to go full spoilers on this. Who did I miss? Chad of the Comic Cord, thank you for coming by. I know he's a Lost fan, just like the great legend over there. Bake the Snake, good to see you. And Samuel David is in the chat. Thank you for coming by. Yes, here we go. Now, Perry, I know that you haven't watched the final season, so this might be ruining some things for you, but we are a full spoiler show considering how long it's been since Lost ran.
You know, it's 10 years since the final season was on.
Oh, my God.
Like, to the day, almost. Or to
the year.
To the month.
Yeah.
Keep it loose.
Since it started airing, you mean? Yeah, because I would say Charlie was born a few months after the finale. And that's when I've told the anecdote many times of me meeting Damon Lindelof at a park because he was on a little vacation after the show had just ended. And I was taking a break trying to get Kate out of the house because a 3-year-old, he gets pretty bored with a baby. And I met Damon Lindelof. Really cool. So, yeah, I guess it's just been about that time. 10 years ago, I was a wee little lad. You were a wee little lad yesterday, brother. Warlord, thank you for coming by. So we are here to talk season 6, arguably the most controversial or dramatic season for fans because of, so many elements of fan expectations and whether or not it delivered on those expectations. I wanted to spend a little time, though, discussing seasons up to now and having a little thought process on how we feel about previous seasons. Ryan, what were your favorite seasons up to this point?
2, 3, and 5. That's what I'm going with.
No number 1? That's a shocker.
I like number 1, but I've seen it so many times that I could take it or leave it. It's for me, season 1 of Lost is like A New Hope. I don't even put it on when I'm watching them again. I've got it. I got that one down.
You've seen that one enough.
Yes. But there are good moments in there, of course. But for me, my favorite moments, I love all the Dharma stuff, all the mysterious island history stuff, and that's
you get a lot of that in season 2 when you get into the hatch, season 3 when they really break apart the hatch, and then in season 5 when they're living with the Dharma folks.
Correct.
And we were talking before we went live a little bit about science and faith, which are the two big thematic components of the show. And season 5 is for me this epic science season, and it has always been my favorite, just because of how much time is spent on time travel ideas and Daniel Faraday's family and all those things that are science based. Versus when we'll talk a little bit about season 6 here in a moment, which is a very faith based season. And I always liked it somewhat less as a comparison between the two, because I'm a science geek.
Big time geek. That's for sure. Yeah, I think this is my least favorite season of the show, honestly. If I had to rank them all, it's either this one or season 4. But as we also discussed before we went live, I don't think that one was as bad as I remember it.
And I will say, rewatching Lost, I forgot how much of season 4 I really loved and how much I really enjoyed, because that's the season when you really start seeing that they got off of the island and what are their lives like off of the island compared to how is it that they got off of the island. All the stuff with Kimi. Kimi is a great villain. I love all that stuff. So there was a lot in season 4 that I had forgotten how much I enjoyed, and watching it sort of binge style was a very different experience than watching it episode by episode. Bake in the chat says 1, 2, and 3 were good. 5 was good too. He was not a big fan of 4. It's possible if you ever rewatch it at some point, Bake, that you would appreciate that season. Bueller with a great numbers joke. I really do appreciate 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. You, sir,
Imagine.
You can reset the Dharma computer.
If we had been so lucky to get 42 seasons of Lost. Oh my.
Yeah, so for me, I think like you, I would probably put 1 somewhere on the back burner because it was an uneven season. It was the first season took a while to find out what are we really trying to do here on this show. I think they knew certain storylines they wanted to do far out, but did they know day to day what they wanted stories they wanted to tell? That was a little harder, and as a result, some of season 1 is very uneven, but I would say the same is true of most of the show. And a comment I constantly make about this show is that it's unfair to compare Lost to a Game of Thrones or a Stranger Things, because the style, era, and function of their form of television is so dramatically different.
Because of Lost.
Also. But having to make a show with commercial breaks, which means you have to have a dramatic beat for every commercial break, having to make 24 to 26 hours in a year.
That's why I think season 4 holds up a lot well later too, because it's the shortest. And at the time I was bummed out because of the whole writer's strike, and I was thinking that was going to make the whole season feel really off. But I think the shortened episode length for that season in particular kind of makes it flow a little better. There's not as much useless crap in that season.
Well, and then you look at like a Game of Thrones where they would take a 2-year break and give you only 6 episodes versus Lost that had to turn around and give you another 24 episodes the following year. And again, commercial breaks and all of the things that were a challenge for them. I think what they could do on their modest budget and shoot the entire show almost entirely in Hawaii and yet make it look like Iraq and London and LA and New York and Australia. It was, I think there's not enough respect for what a network television show like Lost could do versus a Game of Thrones or a Stranger Things or what have you.
Yeah, it really makes me wish that we could have gotten Lost now. I would have liked to have seen Watchmen era Damon Lindelof make Lost on HBO, for example. What could have been?
Yeah, Fire Guy Ryan and I definitely big Lindelof fans. I loved The Leftovers. I think it's a really underappreciated television show. I know Ryan has a lot of passion for it as well. And then, of course, we just both finished Watchmen. Both really loved it and are happy that there's not going to be another one, or at least that they feel free not to force a season where there is no need to put one.
Right. We'll see. I could go either way on that one.
Bueller says episode 1 of the first season of Lost is one of the best television shows ever produced. And I still think it ranks very high up there in one of the most expensive hours of television ever produced as well. Very, very expensive. Drew Manchu's asking for a Lost reboot or maybe a comic book. And I will say that's one of the first things that got Fire Guy Ryan and I to like, did we just become friends? It was he asked me the question, what if there was going to be a Lost comic book, what would you like it to cover? And I was like, okay, I don't even need to answer this. I already like this guy. This guy's awesome. And we both had different responses, which is fine. That was kind of the fun of it. For me, I always wanted, and this is going to tie right into the 6th season. I always felt like there were storylines that never got adequate time. They never got the correct time to sort of bloom into something really interesting. And chief among them for me was the Michael Walt story. And that clearly ended at the end of season 4. And we really, from then on, didn't get anything of any significance when it came to those characters and their lives. And yet they seemed so much more important. And so for me, I would have loved a comic book focusing on Walt, almost like, because he is very much like the kid in The Shining. And what is his life going to be like as he grows up? Is Walt going to end up becoming, a caretaker for the island or whatever? So for me, I would love a Walt, even if it like brought his dad in as a ghost he talks to, or if it was like their time off of the island together. That's my thoughts. What about you, Ryan?
What did I say? I don't even remember what I said. What did I say about a Lost comic? I think if you ask me on the spot right now, I'm like I said earlier, man, the whole thing that got me on this show was like the mystery of like the creepy organization who built all the suspicious, mysterious underground bunkers on the island. So like maybe an overview of like a Dharma Initiative like backstory comic. But I don't know, man. Like I think a Walt comic would be very cool.
Yeah, and Drew Manchu says Mr. Echo as well. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
A Walt comic could have the benefit of like checking in with different people, over courses of time, because he was kind of on the island and then off the island for a lot of the show, and there's a lot of options there, I think, if you wanted to. But a reboot, I would be very much on board with.
Yeah, as far as a reboot, I would never. I don't feel like they need to tell this exact story again, and I think that would be a horrible idea, because the beauty of the way Lost unfolded and the style and the form of it was you didn't know what was going to happen. And when things were revealed, it led to more interesting things down the road. And I think if you knew all the information going in, it would be a very boring show. Right. Don't worry, Dylan, you are not the only one who hasn't watched it. But if you decide that this conversation piques your interest, I believe Hulu still is running the original seasons of Lost, and you can check it in there if you have that. You're not a troll. You are so nice to come by and just hang with us for a second or two and hear a little bit of us talking about final seasons of television shows as a sort of broad topic. Do you think you have an example of a show? I would ideally love it if it was a show that ran for a little while, not like The Leftovers, which had such a short 3. I know it was the first thing that came to my mind, right? But a show that had a final season that was really satisfying. Is there one that comes to mind for you?
The Wire. Immediately, The Wire. Breaking Bad. Sopranos. Not Game of Thrones.
Yeah. I am intentionally wearing a Winter is Coming Calvin and Hobbes homage Game of Thrones shirt, because I knew that Game of Thrones would come up. Up until that final season of Game of Thrones, I was willing to say it was a better show than Lost, but I was waiting for it to finish. And of course, the belly flop that landed there at the end definitely robbed it of that place. It was quite a spectacular belly flop. I didn't hate it, but it certainly robbed the impact, right?
The moment the person hit the pool was the final season of Game of Thrones, but you could see the spectacular diving fail that they made as they launched off the board and spun through the air before hitting the pool. I would argue the last few seasons of Game of Thrones, ever since they left the books, honestly, were bad. They were bad. Like in retrospect, like the show burned me about halfway through. Like I was pissed with Game of Thrones.
Thank you, Dylan.
I got the books right over here, so I'm good. I got the books.
And yeah, I love those books as well. I think they're wonderful and a great read if you're a Game of Thrones fan and really want the quality and the show burns you in some way. Read the books; they're great. And I wish nothing but health to George R.R. Martin so he can get us there.
Type fast.
Yeah, Patrick Walt, Boardwalk, The Wire, Oz, Sopranos, Game of Thrones, Band of Brothers. I don't think it's fair for Band of Brothers, but I mean. I struggle with The Wire because I do think the last is the worst season of that show. So I struggle to say that one. It's hard to find a show, and this was kind of my treatise or my point. It's hard for a final season of a show to give you what you want, to really hit the nail on the head and leave you feeling like, yes, that ended well for me. Now, a finale can do that. And I know several finale episodes that nailed it. But to have a whole final season be everything you want a show to be, it's a sticky wicket. It's a tricky, it's a hard needle to thread. And I feel like I want that sort of in people's minds discussing this season, because I think it is the worst of the 6 seasons, but it's not an utter failure.
No, not at all.
Boston Legal. I was actually thinking of the one that came to my mind. I would mention is The Good Wife, which I think is a highly underrated legal show drama. And I love the way that series ended. And I loved every hour of that show. It was another 20 episode a season program, and made in this era of television that is that style of TV is kind of dying out. And I think it's just super underrated. Really well done, and I thought they finished in a beautiful way, kind of like right back where they had started, which I think a lot of shows try to do, which is get back to the core of what the show was about and end with something that is true to what the story was trying to say all along. And yes, Evangeline Lilly is hot. So there's that. Thank you for Sharon for pointing that out.
She was big with High School Ryan, that's for sure.
Lost has the legacy of being followed by numerous terrible mystery shows that went nowhere, a bad trend. Yeah, and I think, Drew, it's because they didn't learn what was good about Lost, and it was not the mystery mythology. What was good about Lost was the originality. And other shows that have been great, it's because of originality. You look at other things Damon Lindelof has done, he is not copying what he did for Lost. He is trying to do something else that's original, and I think that's why it works.
Even when he's adapting Watchmen, he was being original. Instead of telling that story, he made his own unique Watchmen story after it was all done, after the original comic.
I agree. Fringe was great. It was a very underrated show, and I really enjoyed it. But also a show that took a while to find its footing, and then once it did, became something really interesting. So let's talk season 6. Season 6 of Lost, for those that are completely new to the idea of Lost, the show focused on a plane crash on an island, but then very quickly evolved into understanding that the island was inhabited. The island had been inhabited for many, many generations, that there were buildings, structures, and all sorts of science and faith sort of things happening on this island, and that our crash survivors were going to be put through a ringer of sorts. Some of them left the island and then realized that leaving the other friends behind was a mistake and had to figure out how to go back. And then ultimately, our heroes in this final season have now been rejoined together. In season 5, they were separated back on the island, separated by time, some in the past and some in the present. And then the season ended. Season 5 ends with a giant explosion. The screen goes white, which is different for Lost. Usually the screen goes black and the title appears. Season 5 ended with the screen going white. And we don't know, did all of our characters just blow up? What happened? And I will say one of my favorite moments in season 6 is just the first few seconds.
The very beginning. Correct. Yep.
Right? So the beginning of season 6 is they're on the plane. The white fade out, fades back in, and they're all on the plane. But they don't crash. There's turbulence and drama, and then they keep flying.
Well, the whole goal of them detonating the bomb was because through some mystical science fiction magical mumbo jumbo, it was supposed to blow them back into the future, into the present time, and they were supposed to land. The airplane was never supposed to crash, and they were supposed to land safely back in Los Angeles in 2004, like when they left, and everything was supposed to be fine. But then you find out that this airplane is flying over like a sunken island that we have known this whole time. Like everything, we see things that we recognize on the bottom of the ocean.
Yep.
So this isn't just the real world. This isn't the real world. Like this, that's not the island that they crashed on. There's something different happening in this instance. So it makes you think, and then before you know it, you're just back in Lost mode, and everything doesn't make any sense. And you're like, I thought this was supposed to be the last season. How can they be throwing all this new, different, confusing stuff at us right here at the end? But there we go.
So we're into this portion of the show. The early seasons did what's called a flashback sequences, where heroes would be a main, one character might be the main focus of a given episode, and we would see who they were before they got to the island, a little flashback. Later seasons had flash forwards, where we saw how characters, now they're off of the island, what it is that they've become, and they're now reflecting on who they were when they were on the island. This is the season where they do something different, and the term they coined for it was a flash sideways. We are seeing our characters landing at LAX as they were meant to land, and what would their lives might have been like. And of course, there's more to it as the season goes along, but that is sort of what we are presented with week to week. Does that seem accurate to you?
That's a fair way to categorize it. And the frustrating part, is that the right word? That's the word I'm going to use. The frustrating part is that week by week, in the moment, you don't really know what you're watching. Like you kind of understand that these are like Elseworlds versions of our characters almost. Like you get to see John Locke in a successful, loving relationship. You get to see Ben as kind of a cool, calculating teacher who can kind of actually make people like him in this universe. He's a likable dude.
People ahead of himself.
Yes.
That was a big moment for Ben this season, is watching him in this sideways universe, putting Alex ahead of himself, right? Putting her future ahead of where he's going to go.
Exactly. Comics on the mind. It's like a lost what if.
It is very much a Lost what if. I wanted to say, there's always people that have questions about Lost because they quit early and they were like, I never understood about the polar bears, or I never understood about the smoke monster. This is the season that gives you a lot of those answers, although I highly recommend going back and watching some of our previous Get Losts. There were some moments that blew my mind. And one of our guests was a gentleman who has a channel and an Instagram, Hydra Collectibles. And I was blown away by some of his insights. He made props and special effects things for movies, and he shared some of the things he'd made. But he had I love his explanation of the polar bears, and I feel like it needs repeating because not enough people really get the polar bear.
Did you say it bears repeating?
It bears repeating.
I thought you were just going to say that. It was too good to not say.
Right. The information the show gives us doesn't give you everything like Swiss cheese. You have to fill in the blanks. The idea is that the island has the ability to move in time and space, and that there is a device sort of buried under the island which activates this power. And the power is so strong it creates a sort of cold environment underneath the island. And what they're doing is training the polar bears to activate this machine. And that if you watch the little training device where the polar bear has to hit the switch and push the button and get his little snack, it's training them to behave and follow the instructions so that an actual person doesn't have to flip the switch. Because when a person flips the switch, they get kicked off of the island, much like these bears are. And the bears we see on the island are the last few remaining that have gone through the training, and they've since escaped after the Dharma Purge. It was really cool to see him discuss it, which is why they have the polar bear skeleton in the middle of the desert that Rebecca digs up, right? Isn't her name Rebecca?
Charlotte, man.
The actress is Rebecca.
The namesake. Yeah. Little Charlotte there. That ties it all in together to season 4. That was like 2 years before when you find her digging up a polar bear in the desert. And you're like, what the hell show am I watching? Why is there a polar bear in the desert now?
Season one, we see polar bears on an island. Why? Season 3, we get the cages. We see what they're doing with them. Season 4, we see the donkey wheel underneath the island, and we see Charlotte digging them up. You put it all together and you can find your own explanation, but the show does not spend time explaining that stuff. And I'm happy for that.
It makes it better. Finding it on your own is half the fun.
And the smoke monster, for those that don't know, there are many unusual things on this island, clearly, and one of them is this sort of intelligent, interacting.
Let you handle this one.
Yeah, the puff of smoke, and this is a huge part of season 6 because this is a sentient being, and the smoke monster is a huge part of this final season because it has, as we figure out at the end of season 5, it has taken over the body of one of our characters. John Locke, the amazing bald huntsman from the wheelchair, did in fact die in season 4, if I'm not mistaken.
No, 5.
4, I think, and then all of season 5 is dealing with it, right? And we see how he got off the island and how he was killed because he was going to kill himself, but then Ben killed him when Ben got all the important information out of him. The body was brought back to the island, and all through season 5, we see John has come back to life, and he's walking around on the island, and he seems full of purpose and motivation, and we're like, wow, this is the John Locke we've always wanted, not the one that was always a self-doubting and confused and lost soul. This is like a new John Locke. And at the end of season 5, we realize why it's a new John Locke. It is actually the smoke monster taking over his spirit, his body, his appearance, and that he has now used the body of John Locke to complete his goal, his mission. And his mission was to kill the protector of the island, his brother, Jacob. And that happened at the end of season 5, just before the island was fixed and the white light appeared. This new version of John Locke, the smoke monster, the man in black, if you will, convinces Ben to kill Jacob. And in doing so, changes everything that's working on the island so that now the island is without a protector, without a guardian anymore.
That was pretty good.
I do all right?
I'm glad you took that one. Explaining the smoke monster is like my least favorite part about defending Lost, because that's all people say. What's with the smoke monster, man?
And this season explains how the smoke monster came to be. What is the smoke monster? The relationship between the two brothers, Jacob and the Man in Black. Man in Black never gets a name. He's played by the actor Titus Welliver from Bosch and what's the cowboy? Deadwood. He's a great actor, Titus Welliver.
One of my top 5 Western films.
He is so good. And he doesn't get a name. He simply is just known as this Man in Black, and he is the smoke monster. But in this season, he is mostly just the character is played by Locke. And Locke spends a lot of the season when we see stuff on the island. And, I don't want to go episode by episode. We have 2 things going on. We have this flash sideways, this what if Lost universe, which slowly gets revealed as to what it actually is. And we have our on the island universe. When we finally get back to the island, and it takes a good while. I want to say it's like almost an hour before we get to the island and we see what's going on there. Our heroes who were stuck back in the 70s have now been transported to the current day. And the mistakes of that season 5 decision to blow up the bomb result in the death of Juliet and the sort of shattering of this group they had bonded, right? Jack and Sawyer go at it, and that's not working. And Juliet dies. Kate's stuck in the middle. Jin and Sun scattered across the island, all this kind of stuff. I think it all is a result of that decision. And for me, it leads to my least favorite part of season 6. And I'm curious to ask you what yours is in a moment. My least favorite part about season 6 is the ever shifting alliances. My brain hurts from like, I'm on your side. And next week, nope, I'm not on your side. And then the week after that, it's like, oh, I'm going to be joining this guy. And the week after that, I was like, nope, I'd rather be with this person. Nope, I was tricking you to be with this person so I could really be with this person. And everybody's doing it. It's like, it's literally like Survivor. And it's the worst part of this season for me. Drives me crazy.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that distinctly before, but yeah, there's a lot of shifting alliances. I always felt that way with Kate, especially, but that was going on all throughout the show. I feel like it was exemplified for her, at least with Jack and Sawyer. Like she could never pick, and she's always going back and forth between 2 different sides. But for me, I thought you were going to say what I think my least favorite part of season 6 is it might be the temple, that whole side of the others and the whole storyline. Like, I really wanted to find this mysterious temple that they had kept name dropping and dropping hints about up until season 6. For years they've been mentioning this mysterious temple that exists somewhere on the island, and we see it in the early part of the 6th and final season of the show. But it's weird.
And for me, it brings up a flaw of a lot of final seasons where TV shows want to introduce a whole bunch of new ideas, locations, and characters right at the end. And I think that that's a fundamental flaw of final seasons, where they decide that they want to add something that they feel like was missing, and they don't realize they're cooking with all the ingredients already. Like, you don't need to be throwing in a whole bunch of new stuff. You need to work with what you got and work things to their final destinations.
I would have been fine if they put the temple in there, even for like an episode or two, and like just explain it, and we get some time there. It was like a safe haven for them, like a sanctuary. There was a good story reason for these castaways or whatever to be hanging out there with the others. But we spent like a good third of the season there, like the early chunk of the season, and it did end pretty cool. Like we end up with the smoke monster coming in and just like murdering everybody that's there.
Right.
We get a really cool scene of like destruction and chaos and carnage, but. And that's kind of what my problem with it is it just ends. Like, everyone dies, and it turns out all of that time we spent there is kind of wasted in a sense.
No way, TJ, it's lost. There's this takes forever. We're not going to wrap this up.
It's never over.
Thank you, Dylan. I hope you watch it and check it out. And if you do and you finish a season of Lost, check over on my channel and jump onto that Get Lost playlist. You can watch Bueller and I talk about season 1 when you finish with it. Patrick Wall says he watched the 6 seasons of Vikings all at once and was really blown away by that, as far as like a full run to binge watch. So for me, like, the second most frustrating thing about this season too is like they're introducing a whole bunch of random new characters, right? You have some of these Ajira folk, you have some of these temple people, and then you have later Widmore and his whole crew. And I feel like the flaw for me is a whole bunch of new characters to introduce, and they don't need them. And it's fine if Widmore has his red shirts all around him, right? It's fine if the temple has their red shirts, but I feel like it was an opportunity to bring characters to the forefront that had already been there and have more Widmore instead of the random lady, and to have more of the characters we've known all along. That was kind of frustrating to me as well.
Yeah, me too. And I think, I would have been cool with it if they had done it in a different way. I really liked Alana. She came on in season 5. Ooh, Perry, good job.
Fact.
You
may not know about me, but clearly, Perry, no television.
Perry, there's hope for you yet.
Yeah, I think Alana was a great character, but then, I think a lot of time I think they just wasted a lot of time with some of that stuff. And when you're in those, we've only got 10 hours left to tell the story, you got to maximize that time. And I feel like other characters got short shrift. Can you name a character this season that you feel like got robbed of time, of story, of whatever?
The first one that just came to mind is Claire.
That's my first one too. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good, because I almost wish they hadn't brought her back at all. If this was what they were going to do, like, they brought her back and then just kind of put her in the background the whole time. And then when they did focus on her, they made her into like a crazy, like, it felt like they were trying to recreate Russo in a way.
They definitely were. I think that's a great point. They were trying to show what had happened to Russo by showing it happen to Claire.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculous. I mean, crazy Claire with the like skeleton baby she had the little like creepy skeleton baby in the bassinet, and she just had lost it. And it was like, okay, they weren't gone that long. Like, it wasn't that much time. I think she's just absolutely it was too much.
They could have handled it better. And I would have liked to see an episode around her. Like, that would have helped a lot. I think if she had one final like flashback sequence, I would have rather seen that than some of the things we did see in that year.
Ooh, Gore Vidal says that the show made him appreciate Twin Peaks more because he felt like the more he learned about the characters, the less interesting they were. It's a good comment. You're talking to the right guy. Fire Guy Ryan loves him some Twin Peaks.
Got him right here.
Yeah, I do feel like she got the hardest hit this season versus season 4. It was, for me, it was Walt and Michael. I wanted more of Walt and Michael in season 4. They didn't give me, I felt like his ending was robbed of some of the emotion that it should have had. But I felt like that way a lot. Same with Echo. Somebody mentioned Echo earlier.
Oh, Sun and Jin.
But for me, yeah, the next one up would have been Sun and Jin. But in general, I feel like they were the most frustrating characters to me on this entire show.
Sure. Yep.
And I think that's been a theme for me, at least rewatching it, is the Sun and Jin episodes were painful and frustrating, and very few of them amounted to a big impact. And I feel like the longer they kept the two of them apart, the weaker their story became. And this was an opportunity to really connect with them early, but to keep them separated longer and longer and longer, I just felt like it hurt this season. And then their storyline gets rushed right into their deaths there at the end.
Yeah, they get reunited after how many? I don't even remember how many years apart they were. They got stuck through time. They were like split up by 30 years.
All of season 5, half of season 4, and then almost half of this season. So you could say that it amounted to 2 seasons of being separated.
And you get this lovely reunion scene, and then boom, 1 episode later, they're dead. And it's like,
sorry,
it stings. It's a slap in the face almost.
Claire did not go back in time with the rest of the group. She was stuck. Once the time whatever issue worked out, she was in the regular time with the temple people. They were dealing with her, and this whole other story was going on. She was just it did feel weird. It was just this crazy thing going on. For me, we've talked a lot about our favorite characters on the show. Do you have who's to this day, like who is your favorite character? The one that you look forward to when you rewatch the most?
Ben. Benjamin Linus. I love the evil. I love the villains. I'm always down with the sketchy, I love stories about bad men. And I think Ben is a really good example of that in Lost. He's very flawed, and I think that makes him the most interesting character.
That's a great pick. And for me, I picked 2 of the bad good guys. For me, it's Sayid and Sawyer are my 2 favorites. And when there's a Sayid episode coming up or a Sawyer episode coming up, usually I get very interested. And those tend to be some of my favorites. I would say Sayid is a character I felt like gets truncated, and his story feels weird to me in this season.
Very rushed and very squandered again.
I love the idea that he dies and is brought back and is altered by that experience, that it changes him on his inside. I never felt like they gave him the opportunity to really change back, to find his redemption. Does that make sense?
I would have been, I didn't, for me, my issue wasn't with redemption or anything. I would have been fine with him losing his mind and going bad or whatever, but they didn't explore it in any way. He was just kind of depressed and sitting in the corner and looking off and acting weird. And it was like he was glitching out and unplugged, or like he didn't have a software update. Like he was just kind of just like a zombie, just kind of there. And it wasn't
and they never fully explained what happened to him and how he switches back. I think it was all just kind of rushed to me. And I wanted more of what his experience was. I like the general idea. I just don't think the execution was very good.
I think maybe they got too used to writing a 24 episode season. And then maybe when you get to these last few seasons, when they got shortened down to 16 or so,
right.
They didn't change the way they wrote the scripts, I feel like. And they were kind of built for longer seasons. They had more time to figure some of this stuff out, but they really didn't.
Yeah. Let's talk about what we did like. Now, were there stories and characters that you feel like really they nailed it this season, that worked well for you?
We have to talk about Richard Alpert. And I feel that's where you're going with this. There's no other way that you can start that sentence.
No other way? For me, I when we this whole process, this whole rewatch thing started because Fire Guy and I decided to do a series called Top 5, and we looked at our favorite episodes of Lost, and it made me want to rewatch the show. included in my top 5 was one episode from this season, and it is one of my all-time favorites, clearly, and it is the one and only Richard Alpert flashback. And we get to see how Richard, the sort of unaging character on the show, the one with the wicked eyeliner, I've even heard people call him the eyeliner guy.
Do you know that's real? Like, apparently that's his actual eyelashes.
Yeah, this is natural look. Yeah,
right. That's not something he does. That's just he's got thick lower eyelashes.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
So this episode is I think it's considered the 8th if you lump in all the premiere, like the 3-hour premiere that they had. This would be the 8th episode, and it's called Ab Eterno. And we realize that he is from Spain, and that he was on a slave ship, and we get to see him arrive at the island in a storm, crash, and slowly be dying on the ship, and then be rescued by the smoke monster. The smoke monster then tries to trick him into being the conduit to kill Jacob. And that failure leads to Jacob bringing him on board as his consigliere, or whatever you want to call him, his sidekick. And it also explains his, of course, immortality, the languages he speaks, and his relationship with the island and the spirit of his wife. I think it's just an amazing episode, and it sets up so many important things for Richard and the decisions he has to make, being that he failed the island and he failed Jacob by letting Jacob die in some ways. And he's dealing with that regret. It's like losing his wife all over again.
Yeah, he's got a really cool arc in this final season of somebody who's just lost his mind because his whole purpose is just gone, and he feels responsible in a way. So he's kind of going through some dark self-doubt and questioning, and we see some pretty intense acting with him and Matthew Fox as they're both struggling with like faith and what they believe in and what they're willing to die for or not die for. And Richard Alpert, yeah, he doesn't get enough credit in this last season, but he's stellar.
Thank you for stopping by and hitting the like button. Very much appreciated. Yeah, and it's an episode that I feel like as an audience, you find yourself waiting for. I want to understand this guy that doesn't age. You know, you get to see so many great moments. My favorite being when we get to see him. So earlier in the time travel sequence, right, we saw the island was moving in time, and Locke was traveling around, and he gets shot in the leg, and he's laying there, and all of a sudden Richard Alpert shows up, and Richard is like, oh, I'm here to take the bullet out of your leg. He's like, how did you know there's a bullet in my leg? He's like, well, you told me. He's like, no, I didn't. And then, of course, later,
this is a season before.
And then later we see that, of course, Locke tells Richard, I've been, you need to go and take the bullet out of my leg and help me. And how does Locke know that? Well, it's because, he's now older and he's survived. Well, the bullet has been taken out. What I love about it is it flips this idea, right? All along, we felt like clearly Richard Alpert has all the answers. And then we get his flashback and we realize, nope, he has one small piece of the puzzle. And because that piece is an edge piece or whatever, we feel like he really gets it. But the truth is he's just playing the game as much as anybody and trying to make sense of it.
This is an interesting transition, but you made me just think of something. Like, that's a good theme, I guess, because you expect Richard to have all the answers. You wait and you see that he's got a flashback episode coming up. You get excited. You watch his flashback episode, and you realize him, just like everybody else, is brought to this island. He has no idea what's happening. All of this stuff happens to him, and you just kind of have to go with it and accept that you don't know anything.
Right.
And it turns out that we get another flashback episode later this season that involves a mythologically heavy character that goes way back in time. That's supposed to reveal a whole bunch of things about the nature of the show. But again, you find out that people are just confused and being manipulated. And right. I feel like we can't talk about season 6 without talking about Across the Sea.
And I do feel like it dominates the discussion. And so for those that don't know, the episode that Ryan just mentioned, Across the Sea, is the third to last episode. If you just clump multi-part episodes together, like the finale has 3 hours and the premiere has 3 hours, but I call them one. This is the 14th episode. It's the moment when we get basically the island's story. It's the flashback of Jacob and his brother, their real mom, their foster mom, and the sort of rules of the island. And even that, I feel like, despite the fact that they are trying to give us the answers they think we want, is very unsatisfying. When you first saw it, how did you feel?
There's almost no way to describe how pumped I was in the lead up to that episode, because we were right there at the end, right? We were dealing with all these flash sideways for however many weeks, and we saw Richard's episode, and that was like a good taste, Like I was all excited, like, cool, we can get some old mythology. We're gonna get a whole bunch of mysteries answered. And Jacob was one of the most mysterious, interesting characters in the whole show, and he's like ancient, super old. So the thought of seeing his life story, who knows what this could be? This could be the greatest episode of television you've ever seen. Right. But no, it wasn't. In my mind, when people talk about Lost in general, they talk about the finale. When people talk about Lost season 6 in particularly, they only talk about the final episode. But I think this episode, Across the Sea, is the biggest example of like what not to do, like the cautionary tale element of Lost. Like you were saying earlier, like when people made new shows afterwards and they just kind of went full in on the mythology and the mysteries and that stuff, like that's not really why people loved Lost. Like it's all part of it. It's part of the fun, but it's really about the characters that you know. And this episode took place all in the past and without a single person that we had any attachment to, other than Jacob, I guess.
Which, even then, I would argue we don't have a lot of attachment for Jacob because he's
detached. He's a detached kind of character, a presence.
And we very much feel like a relationship to a deity or something. We're not attached to them in any emotional way.
Right.
And he and the man in black, their story, as interesting as people might find it, some parts of it, the reality is there's zero emotional element to this. It is lacking in any emotional strength, and as a result, I think is a very awkward hour.
Yes, it's definitely an exposition dump. It's them putting all their cards on the table and being like, "You guys want to know what the smoke monster is? Here's how they made the smoke monster. Here you go." And for me, like I would almost rather have not found out like what the monster was about at all, rather than seeing it and they just say, "Here's the answer to the mystery," and you're like, "Oh, like, okay, it's a big light in the island that he got thrown into, and it just transformed him into a angry smoke cloud." Like, what else could it have been? I guess like
it's almost like the Lost equivalent of midichlorians, right?
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Because like we already knew from the first episode, this was a show about one light and one dark. Like, Locke sits down and plays backgammon with Walt, and he's like, there's a light side and a dark side. It was like right there at the beginning. I get it. I didn't need to actually see the birth of some of those things, literally the birth of some of those things. So we get a pregnant mother gets stranded on the island.
Yet again, another childbirth scene, by the way. I've never seen so many babies being born in one TV show than I have in Lost.
And apparently Allison Janney is there waiting. Allison Janney, who seems really odd as casting. I don't know why they went with such a huge named actor, like straight off of The West Wing. She's a huge actress, and they picked her for this random part.
She was intimidating. I thought she did a good job, but it was definitely kind of distracting.
Yeah, I never really saw a character. I saw Allison Janney. I was waiting for Martin Sheen to walk through. I'm a West Wing fan. Sorry.
I know.
So she's there. She takes the pregnant woman in. The pregnant woman gives birth to twins, one with lightly blonde hair, one with dark hair. And Allison Janney kills mom and takes mom's role, pretends to be their mother, and raises the two boys. And is obviously, because she's a murderess, a horrible mom. Shocker, horrible mom. Right. And this leads to a lot of drama between the brothers. And one brother, the man in black, choosing to sort of side with the locals on the island who are trying to understand the island and what it can do. And then the other brother falling more into faith and trying to realize, no, I have a destiny and this is what I'm supposed to do. So there's a lot of science and faith elements as well in that episode. I think I liked that episode. I have to watch it again. It says Heroes to Icons. I'm not saying it's horrible. I just think it's got some fundamental flaws, and there are definitely answers we needed from it. But I just think the way they went about it, much like the midichlorians in Star Wars, I didn't need to know. Like, there are things that I didn't need to know.
I do think, though, a lot of the stuff that they raised in that episode did help the final stretch. Like, after this one was done, we had 2 episodes. I almost said 2 hours, but 2 episodes were like 5 hours of television left.
Right.
And in those remaining final hours, it did give a whole different kind of overview, like a whole different layer to the conflict. It made you look at the Man in Black in a better way, because you know what he's gone through.
Humanized him for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was an episode that kind of brings up all the mythology elements. It just lays those cards flat out on the table to set up the finale and the system. This is the season that reveals why characters are coming to this island. Why are they being drawn here? What is this battle between black and white happening on the island here? And our heroes are revealed to be candidates for replacing Jacob, candidates for being the guardian of the island and protecting the phenomena that is this island. Partly that means keeping the smoke monster here and not letting him go. And so our characters are the reason that they've been drawn to the island, the reason that they have these numbers 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. There's a relationship between all of these things that is fundamental to our survivors and being chosen for being being candidates for this job.
Yeah. I don't know, man. This whole season, like, you got all this stuff happening on one hand on the island, and then meanwhile, the whole time you're cutting to this alternate universe where you're still not sure what you're watching. And it kind of contributes to this overall feeling the whole time that, like, you're kind of wobbling between like these two different centers of gravity, and nothing really kind of sticks in a way. And then you get to the end and it's like, now they've got all these pieces scattered all over the table, and they somehow, to keep your puzzle metaphor going, you gotta finish the puzzle in like the last 3-hour finale. And it feels off. I don't know.
I want to bring this idea up because I love the way you said that. Could one of the things that's keeping it from being off, making it off, this idea that up until now, and we even discussed it when we talked about season 5, it felt like every episode had a focus, a character who was able to bridge all the elements in that hour, right? The first season and the second season, it was these flashbacks where a character would be having their arc, and the on-island, off-island stuff would all be threaded through the perception of that hero, right? And in the flashbacks, they had that. The flash forwards had that. Even the time travel stuff, when we really looked at those season 5 episodes, it seemed destined that like an hour would still have a character as the focus. I don't feel as strongly that this really happens in this final season. It seems like episodes are just sort of everybody's a focus.
Yeah, and I think that might be a part of what you were talking about earlier, when they bring in too many things in the final season, when they should be just working with what they already have and letting those pieces speak for themselves. I think the Flash Sideways could have been cool if they had, like you said, stuck to the more tighter constructed, character focused explanations of what was going on, how the stuff in the Sideways was like reflecting, how their current situation was. For me, like, I'm thinking of the Benjamin episode where he's the teacher.
The substitute.
Yes. And like you said, I think that one, at least for me, because he's my favorite, that one had the most like emotional kind of resonance.
He's digging his own grave and
right.
Yeah.
The difference between who he is in real life and who he is in this alternate universe, the contrast between those two alternate versions of the characters, I think, is where the most meat from that potential comes from. But like, why? I don't know. We talk about that in the end. I think when you figure out in the finale what all of this is for and why we're seeing this. Weird...
So let's crack that nut right now.
Do it.
So for those that haven't watched the final season, what is the Flash Sideways? It's kind of a joke in some ways, because all along there were fans in those first few seasons who felt very strongly that our characters had died, and what we were seeing was a sort of purgatory afterlife kind of thing. And that what we were seeing was the flashbacks were their real lives, and the island life was an afterlife. And as much as the creators of the show said, that's not happening, that's not what's happening, and as much as your friends who may have half watched the show tell you that the things happening on the island are after the characters have died, it's
purgatory.
not true. It's not true. What happened, happened. What we see on the island is real. That is part of their lives. The Flash Sideways, however, is that purgatory. It's sort of a joke being played on us as fans, but also an interesting way to look at our characters. It is our hero characters in the afterlife meeting up again with one another for the purpose of moving on, whatever that afterlife might actually be. So the Flash Sideways is purgatory, and many fans were frustrated by this idea. Many people were upset by it, but the idea is fairly simple, that little by little in this Flash Sideways universe, our characters start awakening to the idea that they are dead. They're not alive anymore. And this is a chance to just find one another. And they keep continually bumping into one another, coincidentally. I will say the only thing I like about, one of the main things I like about this idea of this purgatory as the other side of this season is Desmond. And we haven't talked about Desmond yet. Desmond is a phenomenal character because he's the guy who tends to bridge all the gaps and all the elements. And in this season, he is the one, due to the sciences that are being used on the island and experimented on him, he cracks the code and awakens, and then goes about trying to awaken the rest of the group. He jumps from his life into his afterlife, realizes what's going on, and then falls back, and then uses that knowledge to awaken everybody else. And I like that idea. I like the idea. I don't like the execution.
Okay. For me, one of the weaker elements of season 6, it was a very small window, but I actually liked the more ambiguous nature of the flash forwards before Desmond kind of had his Dr. Manhattan moment and got blasted in that little shack he was in.
I love that, Dr. Manhattan. Yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely see Damon, his Watchmen roots showing already.
Yeah, they put him in the little chamber, and he's strapped to the chair, and he's getting forced to. Yeah, so good. I love that hour.
Yes, I do too. Every Desmond hour is always good. There's just shots of him after that. Now that he knows what's going on, and he's trying to make these people, by sparking a connection with a loved one, then everyone kind of awakens. They remember their lives, and they know that this is that they have died, and that this is some kind of afterlife with them, and they could become aware of what's happening. So the final stretch of the season after Desmond's flashback leading up to the finale is him going around and kind of triggering all these people and sparking these reactions with them. And for me, that is kind of, I don't know. I don't like the feel of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The gathering, the team kind of feel of that. It didn't feel right for me. It didn't click. And I'm really not a fan of the Daniel Faraday museum concert setup that they had. The whole I don't know, something about the end of the season didn't quite do it for me with the Flash Sideways. I liked the ultimate final, Flash Sideways stuff in the church with Christian Shepherd.
We'll get right. Now, we're not going to get to the finale tonight. I want to just let people know we're nearing the end of what we want to get to tonight. I plan to have an entire the last one of these shows for my Get Lost series is simply going to be getting everybody back again. We all go back and just talk about those last few hours. So we will not be talking about the final episode tonight. We're just really talking about this season as a whole leading up to it. And I do agree with you. What you're saying is that the parts are not as good as the end piece, right? They don't amount to as much. Talk about a blast from the past. Two Brothers says Lost was great. I do agree with you, sir. That's why we're here. Oh, and what do you think?
Ollie's down. That
So
was
for
funny.
me, I do agree with you that some of those sequences in the Sideways universe were frustrating and didn't amount to a whole lot. I did like the idea of Desmond awakening. I do like the way they had Desmond awaken, the machine, and that whole sequence. That episode was right near Abaterno. It was that they had an episode called The Package where they realized that Widmore has brought Desmond to the island. And then we have Happily Ever After where Desmond is forced into the machine and goes through this amazing experience, which is yet another really great episode where we get him all through like his understanding of the island, which is phenomenal. Oh, Mike Rogers says, Fire Guy Ryan, hooray. I agree.
Hooray!
I say that all the time.
Me too.
My daughters both did before we went live. Fire Guy Ryan. They came running over.
I'm exciting, you know. It's part
Facts.
of it.
So this is kind of where we're going to wrap it up a little bit at the end and give you some final thoughts on season finales, final seasons and things like that. I will say for me, this is obviously the most uneven. I think part of the problem is the writers had challenges as far as what they wanted to do and how they wanted to reveal it. And I don't think they did the best job of pulling that off. I don't think it's just a complete catastrophe or anything like that. I certainly enjoyed this season, and it had a lot of high water marks, like I've mentioned. Right there in the middle, I felt like there was a lot of good stuff. The first few episodes I thought were really, really interesting. It gets bogged down in the temple, like Ryan mentioned. I think it's tricky. They didn't want to reveal that the characters had died and that this was the afterlife. They wanted to keep that hidden from us. They wanted to reveal it to Desmond only in the middle, and then they wanted to save it for us at the end. And that was a tricky thing to pull off.
Yeah.
And to spend that much time in their final season on that simple little idea, it amounted to a lot of wasted space, I think, for me. That's what the Sideways universe was for me, a lot of wasted space.
Right. I agree, unfortunately. It's an interesting concept, and I love that they did it because it shows that they are trying new things and thinking outside the box. Because if they just kept the flashbacks and flash forwards and all that, it would, it's cool.
And it allowed them to focus on their characters, not a whole bunch of new characters, and put them in situations where we got to see and understand them on a different level. I think it's a matter of execution, and it wasn't executed very well.
Sadly. They got better at writing, though.
Well, and you and I talked a lot about Leftovers, which I think has one of the best final seasons of a show. I didn't allow you to pick that answer because I knew we both probably would have picked that as far as a show that had a great final season. I think the final season of Leftovers was near perfect. I think they brought so many elements in that just blew me away, and that final hour was like season 2. I know you love season 2, and season 2 is great.
Yeah.
But I just felt like as far as a show having a final season that did the show a good service,
right?
That was one for me.
I think I might need to go back and watch that again already. Like I just finished Leftovers like a month or two ago. And
everybody's been talking to me about what show to pick next. And I do think Stay Puft is going to kill us if we don't talk about The Wire next. I know that he's amped up on doing a Wire breakdown show. If you're on board with that, the three of us just talking about
I would absolutely be on board with that.
So it could be something to look forward in the future. Get wired. That's what we'll call it. So Ryan, as far as final seasons go, how do you feel about this final season as a whole?
I think it's fine. I think as a piece of the whole, it's better. But if you were to pull it out on its own and examine it under a microscope, kind of like we're doing here, the highs and the lows stand out a lot more than the overall feeling that you get when you watch it. And it does work a lot better after it was on TV. Like when you're on TV and you're watching this week by week by week by week, it can get frustrating. Lost really especially got frustrating, especially too, because back then they had to take extra weeks off sometimes, to make it match up with the network TV schedule. So sometimes you had to wait 2 weeks to figure out what was going on. Sometimes you had to wait like 3 months to figure out what was going on. And then a lot of people just tuned out. So being able to watch this show all at once at your own pace makes it a lot easier to kind of comprehend.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about the constraints of network television, swearing, nudity, and that kind of thing, but also commercial breaks. Oh, you have to have like big episodes for sweeps week. That was a thing. I don't know that that's even a thing anymore, but that used to be a big deal. Certain weeks they would have their like all the big guest stars and the big plot twists and everything would happen certain weeks on those shows. They had a lot of those kind of constraints. And then besides all the technological ones, as far as like trying to create Iraq on Hawaii and those kinds of things.
Plus, it was like the beginning of good CGI on television, like Battlestar Galactica. Like we dealt with that a while ago in the same time period. The smoke monster effects, especially early on, are kind of hit or miss. There's some other CGI work and Lost that could have been better if it had been made now versus 15 years ago.
Yeah. I was always more impressed by what they could do green screen wise with their settings. To make something look like London, or to make they could pull it off like on those great wide shots. It was always brutal for me when the guys would be like in a flashback driving up a driveway, and I'd be like, well, that's clearly Hawaii. Like you can see the tropical plants everywhere and the volcano rock walls and stuff. It's like
only so much you can do with a gray filter to make it look
right.
Like
exactly. Yeah. Oh, it's raining. It's got to be London.
Right. That's where we are now.
Right. But I was always really impressed by that on the show. And for me, this sixth season, as uneven as it is, there are definitely elements that were working well. And there are dramatic and powerful, moving experiences that happen for some of our characters. And we mentioned some of those as well. I guess it's time to say goodbye.
Exactly.
I will say, be tuned to the channel, and I will announce on at some point here soon. We'll get a day together where I can bring back some of those awesome people who've joined me through this journey. Besides just Fire Guy, we got Bueller and Perry and Comic Head 84, Mr. Miracle, Hydra Collectibles. There's a huge list of folks that have joined through the run of this, and we're all going to try to come back. Whoever's ready to talk about the final hours of the show, we're going to schedule a little something. And hopefully have just a great talk about not ending seasons, but final episodes, great finales, and a discussion of whether this show stuck their landing or not. Because obviously the season as a whole might have been uneven, but could the finale save a mediocre season? We'll have to stay tuned.
And we're thinking it's not going to be as long of a delay either between now and that episode.
Hopefully this month. Yes.
Right. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So I'm going to drop some lines to those homies that have joined me in the past. I really do appreciate anybody who came by. I'm really doing like most things on my channel. This is just for me and anybody who's as entertained by it as myself. So I do appreciate my score says we never got above, I think 12. We had about 12 people in here, which was awesome to have that many. Drop us a comment if you'd be interested in me doing a Wire show. We could do a season by season Wire discussion. I know that Stay Puff will be dropping that comment just like a hot rock. And Ryan and I would love to do Leftovers or Watchmen at some point as well. So those are possibilities of the future.
Big Will actually was talking to me before we went live. He wants me to jump on a Harley Quinn live
the
stream
animated series
next week. Yep. I
have yet to start watching.
It's so hilarious. Like I
got a few people that told me they like it.
Yeah. I'm blown away by how much I enjoy that show.
Edwin the comic jabroni has been loving it. Absolutely. Nathan Patrick Wall. Those are good choices. I have not finished Boardwalk Empire, but love me some Wire for sure. Hello, God Tank. Thank you for coming by. We are rounding it out. Thank you all for coming by. And have a great week back to work for me. But this was a great way to kind of finish my vacation time.
Vacation? That's nice. I got to go back to work in like 4 hours.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you giving up a little bit of your sleep time for talking Lost.
That's fine. I'm just chopping my sleep in half. That's how that works.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Wow.